Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we are talking about a new interview with Tesla's head of design, Franz von Holzhausen. Also got a lot of action in the stock today. We'll talk about that, the Fed comments that were made this afternoon. Then we've got a couple of things on Elon Musk and some other items as well. So looking at the stock, another really nice day for Tesla today, finishing up 7.7%, closing at $194.70, while the Nasdaq was up significantly, 4.4% on the day today. Still nice to see that outperformance from Tesla. Sometimes we haven't seen this recently, but riding a really nice wave here as Tesla over the last 5 trading days up 14.5% versus the Nasdaq up about 2.5%. So nice to have a good reminder that the volatility inherent to Tesla does apply on the upside sometimes as well. Of course, when we look at today, a lot of the movement in the market coming after Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's comments this afternoon, flagged that as an item to keep an eye on, definitely worthwhile. Though I don't really agree that he said too much that is worthy of such a reaction. Maybe the absence of bad news helping lift that, but to me, his commentary felt on par with what we have been hearing from the Fed over the last few weeks, and that really has been that, hey, we're starting to get into a period of time where we're going to slow interest rate increases down, but ultimately, what matters at this point is where the terminal rate ends up, and then for how long interest rates need to stay in a restrictive territory. To me, that really has seemed like the message ever since the early November Fed meeting, when they added that sentence or two that we talked about into the FOMC statement, where they noted their consideration for the cumulative increases that have been made so far and the lag time with which those may affect the economy. That's a pretty strong hint. Some of Fed Chairman Powell's comments in the question and answer seem to make people a little bit more worried, but pretty much all of the inflation data that we've had since then has been better than expected. So in my view, this shouldn't be surprising, but again, the absence of more hawkish commentary from Fed Chairman Powell may be having just as much of an impact. Anyway, if we look at the CME Group's FedWatch tool, looks like expectations for a 50 basis point versus a 75 basis point increase for the December meeting have become even more favorable than they were yesterday, that expectation moving from the mid-60s percentile into the high 70s. Anyway, his exact comments on that December meeting was, quote, "The time for moderating the pace of rate increases may come as soon as the December meeting," end quote. So that's getting most of the attention. Powell did also reiterate, though, that the terminal rate will be somewhat higher than thought previously at their economic projections from September, which again, pretty much what we have been hearing over the last month. And then Powell did also say that he does still see a path to a soft or soft-ish landing for the economy. All right, moving on from the stock, we've got a rare interview by CNBC of Tesla's chief designer, Franz von Holzhausen, discussing design at Tesla, including the Cybertruck, the Semi, and Tesla's next vehicle. It's a quick interview, only about 15 minutes. I definitely recommend watching the entire thing, and I'll put the link down in the description, but we'll hit the highlights here, starting with a very interesting response to Franz's favorite design.
I'm curious if you have a favorite design, favorite feature, something that you're most proud of.
Favorite one is the one that's coming. I think that we can talk about. I'm really excited about Cybertruck. I think this vehicle has the chance to be something really radical in a pretty normal space.
All right, so he didn't give us much there, but he did say that he's most excited about what is coming next. On my first listen of that, I thought it was just kind of one of those things that you say, oh, I'm most excited always about the next project. But listening to it again, it does sound like this one is a little bit more special to Franz, especially with how the question was worded. It's more of things that are in existence right now. Do you have a favorite design, a favorite feature, something you're proud of? And they're at the Peterson Museum sitting in front of all the vehicles that he has worked on. It'd be really easy to go to one of those, which he eventually does with the Cybertruck, but not before getting in whatever this new vehicle is that he can't talk about yet. Now, of course, we expect that to be a lower price vehicle, probably the dedicated robotaxi platform, which hopefully we hear a lot more about in 2023. On the Cybertruck, Franz shared some thoughts on the design, some of the delays that have been experienced with the Cybertruck, and how the final design is going to compare to the prototype that we have seen.
Talk about the Cybertruck design. How did this design come to be?
The Cybertruck is one of these rare moments where, in a way, form followed function. A lot of times we put the form in front of the function, especially in the automotive world, and it's really tough to mix the two. But Cybertruck is really born out of the idea of a different way of manufacturing a material that put the toughness on the outside. So we really wanted to use stainless steel as a material so that the hardest part of the vehicle was on the outside, not the delicate paint. And so we really looked at new ways of manufacturing it. You could only break form and form it in one direction. You can't do compound curves or things with the thickness of the stainless steel that we're using. So it really led us to a design that was really planar, really simplistic, and was also a chance to break the paradigm of what pickup trucks have been for the past 60 or 70 years. They're the same. There's kind of this three-box shape.
So it's fun to hear some of that background. Franz actually talked about how the initial design for the Cybertruck was pretty straightforward, pretty simple, a lot simpler than things like the Model 3 or the Model S. I'm sure he's talking about the design of the vehicle itself there, rather than including all of the design of the production process for the Cybertruck, which of course involves a lot of new things, and newness in general is one of the things he brought up when asked about the reasons for the Cybertruck delay.
How different will the production Cybertruck be from this vehicle behind you? And also what's taking so long to get it off the production line?
There's a lot of new things in Cybertruck. When we're reinventing a product, sometimes we have to go through these processes just to prove it out. We had this idea that making an exoskeleton vehicle could work, and so we've been using that time to make sure that that actually is working. And the Cybertruck will look, for all intents and purposes, just like the one behind us. It's maybe slightly smaller, a few percentages, but in general, this is what the truck will look like.
So a couple thoughts on that. Franz not directly saying that the exoskeleton is a reason for the delay, just saying that in this time that they have had, they've been making sure that that is going to work well. I think there are a multitude of factors that have pushed the Cybertruck back. I think initially ramping up the Model Y, impacts from COVID, maybe slower ramp of 4680s than what Tesla had hoped for. A lot of things in there that may have all played their part at different points in time. As for the size of the Cybertruck, Franz there mentioning that the final version is going to be some small percentage smaller than the prototype. There's been some flip-flopping on that over the last couple of years. I think this matches the last information that we'd had from Elon. Either way, nice to have an update on that. We are now just one day away from the Tesla Semi delivery event, and we get an opportunity here to hear from Franz about his thoughts on the Semi. He called it a radical departure from how semis have historically been built. He said they didn't really know a ton about that going into it, but they've gotten a lot of user feedback, they've done a lot of research, and starting from a clean sheet has given them a lot of opportunities to make the product better.
And by having a completely different package than what exists currently, we're allowed to come up with a completely different end result, and one that's way better for the driver, the user of the product. There's much more interior cabin space. There's a much better view. We put our safety systems into it, including autopilot. There's no fumes, there's no vibrations, just a better overall working space for the driver.
So we'll look forward to hearing more about that tomorrow. I had seen a couple people wondering if Tesla would be including autopilot on the Semi. Of course, Franz there, unsurprisingly, confirming that they will. The exact hardware and how that may operate or not operate with FSD beta, I think, are the more interesting questions on that front. Just a couple of other interesting comments from Franz. He did note that in their design process, something that we've heard Tesla talk about before, they are trying to go from idea to production car in 2 years. It's been a while since we've heard Tesla talk about that, but that does still seem to be a goal. He talked a bit about autonomy, saying that, quote, "I think the future of transportation is going to change pretty radically. I feel like we're on the precipice of that with the advent of autonomy," end quote. So you could interpret that as some bullishness from Franz on FSD. Would say that on the precipice, though, could have a pretty wide range of meanings. Finally then, Franz was asked about what it's like to have Elon Musk as a boss. He chuckled a bit and said, "Elon's a great boss, cares deeply about the customer experience, about the product, and is always pushing the team, being as radical as possible, and not putting limitations on things." All right, moving on, we've got an update on the Department of Transportation in California, or Caltrans. Drive Tesla Canada reporting that they have placed an order for 399 Model 3s to be used as Department of Transportation vehicles. These are going to be rear-wheel drive vehicles. They've already taken delivery of 236 of them, expect to receive the rest before the end of the year, at which point Tesla vehicles will make up almost exactly 1/3 of their just shy of 1,200 vehicle fleet. Caltrans told Drive Tesla Canada, quote, "For each gas-powered vehicle we replace with a zero-emission vehicle, that represents one fewer vehicle that needs to stop at the gas station and deal with volatile fuel prices, along with lower maintenance costs, which will save time and taxpayer money over the life of the vehicle," end quote. So nice to see that, and it looks like politics hasn't influenced their decision-making too much on that process, although we don't know, I guess, when this order was placed, but I think most government EV adoption is a win. All right, next we've got a couple of updates on Elon. Of course, a lot of tweets from Elon over the last couple of days about Apple, the 30% fee in the App Store. Elon expressing that Apple may have been considering removing Twitter from the App Store. Well, today it seems that finally and for once, diplomacy has prevailed. Elon tweeting out this afternoon, "Thanks Tim Cook for taking me around Apple's beautiful headquarters," and later adding, "Good conversation. Among other things, we resolved the misunderstanding about Twitter potentially being removed from the App Store. Tim was clear that Apple never considered doing so." Hopefully this in-person face-to-face meeting building some reciprocity between Elon and Apple and Twitter. As we have talked about before, I think Elon in interviews, very different than the Elon that we see on Twitter. I'm sure that applies to in-person meetings like this as well. So very glad to see that. Hopefully that calms some waters just in general. And it looks like after this, Elon has now followed Tim Cook on Twitter. Elon also got some nice support today from Reed Hastings, Netflix CEO. He said that Elon Musk is the bravest, most creative person on the planet. And quote, "I am 100% convinced that he is trying to help the world in all his endeavors," end quote. I think that line of thought used to be more prevalent. I think with all the recent events, it's nice to have that point of view resurfaced a little bit. That can be easily forgotten when there's a lot of other noise around. The other commentary around Elon today coming from Ukrainian President Zelensky, expressing some frustrations around Elon's recent comments on the war. We're a few weeks on from that at this point in time, but in essence, Zelensky saying, hey, before you talk about this, before you think you understand, come here and see this with your own eyes. Otherwise, you don't know. So some media reporting that as an invitation, sort of more an expression of frustration than anything else, I think. All right, that is where we'll leave it for today then. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast. And we'll see you tomorrow for the Thursday, December 1st episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.